Succeeding in private practice is hard. That's no surprise or nothing, new to anybody who's doing it today. But my guest today has some really good, I think, in-depth thoughts on how to do it from his perspective. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they want to do, but we really believe that the care is better when it's just you and your provider at the table and nobody else is secretly whispering in the provider's ear about what their agenda is, what their needs are, like a hospital or a health system or owners that are far away. The care is best when it's just you and your doctor collaborating on your care. And today, my guest is Dr. Alan Kamrava. With graduate degrees in both business and medicine, Alan has maintained dual exposure throughout his career. He has dual surgical board certifications in general surgery and colon and rectal surgery. He has extensive management experience, having been an acting VP at a multi-billion-dollar real estate company, a consultant for an international risk management consulting firm, and he's worked at Deloitte Consulting. He's on the teaching faculty in the Department of Surgery at Cedar Sinai Medical Center, and he has published books, journals, and textbook chapters, and has spoken at several international conferences. Caring for his community in multiple ways, Alan serves on numerous boards while simultaneously curing cancer as a surgeon. His breadth of experience in healthcare and management provides him a uniquely well-rounded perspective on how to tackle the uber-complex field of insurance. Alan is also an amateur triathlete residing in Los Angeles with his wife and 4 children. I said this before, I'll say it again. I don't know how the hell you found the time to come on here, but I'm glad you did. Alan, thank you for coming on Practice Care.
Thank you for having me. Sleeping little helps.
Sleeping little helps. That the math, the arithmetic of the day suggests that. There was a lot that is packed into your bio. We talked about beforehand, building a referral base as a private practice owner, the must-haves to succeed in today's healthcare environment. We're going to get to that. But first, just give us, fill in the blanks and give us some more color about your background than your bio gave us. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Carl.
Yeah.
So born and raised in Los Angeles, first generation of a immigrant family. They were Persian and Jewish. So they left right at the time of the revolution. Gives you a little bit of how old I am if you date that. So 1979.
We're not going to date that.
Yeah. So I always joke I was made in Iran, born in the US, which was great because my citizenship came just in the right timing.
Nice.
But I come from a family. It's interesting. My family was all healthcare on both sides. I think I always lose count, but I have 15 or 16 first cousins. Every single one of them is in healthcare at some level, be it an optometrist or a physician or a dentist. And my uncles on my dad's side, all of them were in medicine. My grandmother was the first kind of considered female physician in Iran. She was a midwife, but they called her physician. And she's really well known for it. And my grandfather owned a hospital out there, actually.
Okay.
So it was our language in our family. And my brother-in-law always jokes, and even my wife, that the first few family meetings where they just listened to the family conversations were just kind of like, whoa, what are these guys talking about? Because the limits of what is okay at the dinner table change when everybody is in that field.
But they do.
Yeah. And so it was kind of where it all set. And I actually in college started to realize I had this very kind of tunnel vision look of the world because it was always healthcare. And I knew very early on, as all my cousins did, that we're going into healthcare. And so I started looking into business. I started working in the business world. And when I started medical school, in the first month, they said, we are offering a dual MD MBA program. You would be the first class. And I was the first to jump on it immediately. I took the GMATs and essentially took a year off, got my business degree. This is when I worked at Deloitte at the same time and started this risk management. And I loved operations. To me, how I wrote in my essay for business school, it's great. I'm going to be a surgeon and that's amazing. But without the scalpel, a surgeon is essentially nothing. And it's more than just how is a scalpel created? How is the scalpel created, manufactured, made in New Jersey? I was training in Florida, and not in Florida, in Philadelphia, goes over the Betsy Ross Bridge, gets it to our hospital, stays sterile, and all to the point where it finally reaches my hand. There's an entire process.
It's cool, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And to me, that's a puzzle, and I love puzzles. That was still to this day, operations to me, I think is the side of the world that people really take for granted of how much happens. Even if you think about Amazon, what Amazon does to get us
Yeah.
our packages, it's a really amazing
I
feat.
worked at Baxter Healthcare for a while, and some of my favorite trips were manufacturing plant tours,
Yeah.
just to watch, what you take, that bag that's hanging, that's, at the other end of which is a needle in your arm.
Yes.
All the care, all the everything, all the steps that it took to get there. It's just, you'd stand and stare at it. And I was just fascinated. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly it for me. I love that. I think it's an amazing thing to be able to do efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So that led to that, and I've always stayed on both sides. Ultimately, finished my fellowship at University of Pennsylvania in colorectal. Moved back to LA, started practice. In around 2014, 15, I really started to get frustrated with the payment side of medicine, and that's something we'll get into further. But just in terms of bio, led me to founding a startup that I have as well, which is uso.com, spelled kind of like Europe, EU, EUSOH. And really, it's probably the only successful model right now globally, other than something in China, that has reinvented the model of insurance from the ground up. And how do we take the parts and techs, thinking of it as operation and the changes in finance, where we think about PayPal, Swipe, Venmo, and utilize that to build something from the ground up for coverage, but that realigns incentives so that we have no vested interest to cause hyperinflation in any given market, which is what's really killing healthcare. And it's killing veterinary care too, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, that's kind of me. And I do the triathlons for really just health. I suck at them. My times are embarrassing. I will never share them. But it keeps me healthy. And it gives me, I ran yesterday, I biked today, and I'll probably go for an ocean swim, hopefully tomorrow, the way things are working out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a good tour, and I appreciate the added color. So let's get into it. And when you say today's healthcare environment, that's a very large term, and I bet you 10 people of reasonable intelligence could take that and fill it in with something that made sense but would be completely different. So tell us what you mean by that.
I agree with your statement, Carl. There's so many pieces to it. So if I say on one, I by no means mean that's it.
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
there's attention span. But to me, one of the biggest things is we'd like to blame the insurers, but it's deeper than that. So we, as a point of concept, it's actually something I'd written about in the past. So I did a very complex surgery, one of the more complex surgeries we do in my field, colorectal, where we remove someone's rectum has failed. And so we remove that and we reconstruct a new rectum using small intestine. So we take small intestine and we reconstruct it and connect them, so that ultimately they can have a diseased organ removed, but not have a bag on their belly long-term. And this is one of our more complex surgeries. Typically it takes 4 or 5 hours. This patient was a dear friend of mine, and it took even longer. And he had all these other issues that were going on. So he was in the hospital for about a week. Now, when we get paid surgically, we get a fee for surgery. And then there's something called as a 90-day global. And so all care after for the next 90 days is included in that surgical fee. That includes rounding in the hospital, phone calls, follow-up in the office, anything that goes with that.
Like all you can eat, doesn't matter.
All you can eat. You get one fee, and that includes the time you spend on the surgery and everything after. And so his wife, because it was a dear friend of mine, a few months later said, I need to come talk to you. So she came to the office and showed me her explanation of benefits, which is what insurers give to show what the payments were.
Right.
And she said, I don't understand. The insurers paid you $1,540. And that was for everything you've done for us over the last couple of months, including the surgery. And the hospital got paid $297,000.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so if I were to say where the problem, there are many problems, but what I see as really kind of foundational is the way payments are set up is the facilities and ancillary care is where the thrust of the payments are going. Physician payments are not adjusting up. Our costs are adjusting up. We have to increase fees for our staff. They get increases, But our fees are locked. And if anything, if you adjust them towards inflation, they're actually going down year after year. And we have very little power over them. I don't get to dictate what I get paid. And so you have this world of physicians that are out of network. I'm in network with some insurers, out of network with others.
Right.
I did go for a time where I was completely out of network, but even that reality changed. You'll see a lot of physicians that are involved with surgical centers, and there's a whole discussion why. And really what they're doing at that point is they're realizing that the crux of fees are going to the facilities. And so if you take my example with that hospital, if I was a hospital employed employee and I did that surgery, you could see very quickly how just after a few surgeries, the hospital recoups my salary very quickly. And so it's very easy for a hospital to say, we will hire you to work for us and we'll pay your salary, because they're getting those fees on the facility side very quickly. And a cousin of mine was a surgeon at UCLA. He's no longer there. He moved states. But I remember he called me once. He said, Alan, I think there's a conflict of interest, though, if you have a surgical center, because now you preferentially take patients to your surgical center. I said, okay, well, you are
What's the difference?
Well, I said, you are a UCLA employed surgeon. Tell me what hospital or surgical center you operate at short of UCLA. What lab center do you send your patients to short of UCLA? Mm-hmm. Diagnostic centers short of UCLA, referrals short of UCLA. Your entire world, because you're employed by them, is only UCLA physicians, labs, facilities.
And they only allow that. If you want to go outside, you have a problem, even if you think it's a better choice for your patient.
Exactly.
You've got some explaining to do. Yeah.
Exactly. Meanwhile, I had privileges at 3 hospitals. At the time, I've now consolidated to 2. I actually had privileges at 4 surgical centers. Based on insurances, we would pick where to go to. But my cousin who was at UCLA was getting his salary through those facility fees. A surgeon who's in private practice owning these facilities, be it a pathology lab or a surgical center, what you are doing is recreating that model.
Yeah.
And I highly urge everyone not to be shamed into thinking, well, there's a conflict of interest. There's not, because I would take them to our surgical center, the other surgical centers, which I had no interest in. There was another one in the Valley, which wherever it was better for my patient, be it traveling or the team I needed or the hospital, but there was actual choice there. That physicians who are employed actually, believe it or not, have none of. And if you're to say there's any conflict of interest, it's actually the employed physicians more than anyone else, because they really keep those patients within that employed system altogether.
Yeah. Yes. And there it is. If I'm in up here, I'll just pick the North Shore University Health. There's a few of them, but that's the one we are. So if my doctor wants to refer me to Dr. X and Dr. X is outside of North Shore, my doctor's got a problem. Yeah. And either my doctor wants to deal with it or doesn't. And well, we'll just find somebody else, but that's not fair. And it's a stunning, I guess I'm not surprised to hear you say that the facility got more. It's a stunningly large delta. And what's interesting is that if you don't bring the surgery there that day, they get nothing. And so if we just want to look at dollars and cents and not care or anything else, that's interesting. So you get nothing to do the surgery, but then not nothing, but a little bit. And then you get this all you can eat 90-day thing afterwards where you just have to eat it. I mean,
yeah. And it's interesting because I remember our garage just broke. And we've had major issues. We can't get this thing fixed. And every time we call a repair person, it's $500 to $1,000 for a few hours. And I'm like, or even plumbing.
Wrong line of work, right? Do you say that to yourself? I went into the wrong line of work. I used to say that once a month. I kept track. I'm like, I'm on year 3. I just, that guy has got something else figured out better than me. Yeah.
I do. I think about that. I mean, we called a plumber and it was $1,500 for some work. It wasn't very intense, but it was $1,500. Fine. I actually think it wasn't unreasonable, but as a colorectal surgeon, I'm basically a physiologic plumber. There's really no better kind of analogy. And on that kind of analogy, we make less on a unit per hour time effort for plumbing, fixing of a human versus of a house.
Yeah.
And it's the truth of it. We do. And so what you see, and this is, I always tell young surgeons who call me or even physicians about private practice, there are ways to still succeed financially in private practice that are ethical. There are many more ways to succeed unethically. They really are, and they're easier to find, where you can do little procedures on patients, add volume, over ad nauseum in volume. And we see it a lot, and it's disheartening, but it's because people are just trying to succeed. So let's just do an EKG on everyone. Let's just do an echo on everyone. Let's just do a colonoscopy on every person who comes in. This is happening a lot. And part of it is the financial incentives in it. In our field, hemorrhoid treatment abounds because they pay us quite literally better to do a short little hemorrhoid procedure in our office than what I get paid to do a full colonoscopy. I get more to do a hemorrhoid treatment. And the risks are far smaller. The time commitment is lower. And so there are many in the field who any patient that walks in, irregardless of what they're there for, will almost always also get a treatment for their hemorrhoids. And what that is a financial treatment. There's ways to succeed without having to put yourself down that rabbit hole. It will take some thinking and considering how you go about it, but it's there and it could be done.
So perfect segue. So let's get into a few of those. These must-haves to succeed, given the obstacles that you just described. What would you say are a few of them?
So referral network is important. Quality care, obviously, but so your referrals will do it. And one of the things I think physicians really shy from is that word networking. The world is networking. If you think to yourself, who would I want to give my patient to? It's someone that I have some type of connection with. It doesn't mean that you're sitting out there doing fake friendships. That's not what networking is. It's just knowing people. In the whole world of, even if you're thinking about going to meet parents at your kid's school, that's networking. And so it's really important to get out and just not, when you think networking, don't think networking events. That's where I think people fall apart on the idea of networking. They go to these events that are sole purposed for networking, and they're very difficult events. Think about the rest of your life as a networking event. So for instance, our kids' school would do events for fundraising and they'd have silent auctions. And basically anything I could put my name on silent auction, I would, with my MD after it. So if there was a restaurant in the city that was, you could bid on to get, I would put that, and little things like that. And on referral basis, basically taking that back to the kind of the first thing I said is, it's just, you want to connect, you want to send a patient to a person that you feel like you have just, why does Coca-Cola still advertised? Because name recall is incredibly important. And I think people underestimate how important name recall is, right? Coke really is probably the most known name brand in the world, and they still spend millions on advertising because they still have to be top of mind. We say that you have to have 21 or 22 touch points of your name or of any brand name in someone's mind before it becomes a purchase. A little bit different in referral. That's a retail kind of statement. But
it is multiple. It's
it
more
is
than
multiple.
one. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so what I did early on, I built my referral network in hyperspeed, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I really did. And a lot of people kind of commented on what Alan's done. Is Beverly Hills is a hyper competitive market where I am. In our hospital, we have 13 colorectals. University of Pennsylvania, which serves 3 states because of how big of a center it is, had only a few for Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey. At Beverly Hills alone, there's 13. Then UCLA has 2. St. John's down the street has another 2. USC has a whole department.
Why?
So there's a very high concentration and density of specialists. And so to get those referral networks is very difficult in a city like Los Angeles. And so what I did when I first started my practice, I made myself just spreadsheets of target physicians that would be good to work with. And I basically put in meet for lunch. And my wife was on board, and I said, for the next 2 years, almost every night of the week, we're going for dinner with a couple. And I made a point that every lunch break was to go meet someone for a quick hello. And we've all been there where we don't like when a farm rep comes and lingers around and tries to talk. But I'd get out, on the lunch break, I'd just get up and walk to someone's office and just say, hey, I'm Alan. I just want to say hi, nothing else, shake their hand and walk out. And then go to dinner with their couples. Hey, we're here, we're new in town. I'd love to, meet you and your wife, you and your husband for dinner. And we would do that 4 or 5 nights a week for 2 years.
It's necessary and exhausting.
It is. It's necessary and exhausting, but you become a real person to everyone. You forget how many, if a physician thinks about how many referrals they know by name but have never actually met, knowing someone personally leaps and bounds much better than saying, I'm going to go give a grand rounds event. I never gave a grand rounds because I just said, that's what everyone's doing. So let me do what everyone else is not doing, because there's a huge gap in what people are doing. Because the one thing that happens in medicine is we are all physicians. We are people of routine. This is what everyone else did. To get into med school, they volunteer in the hospital, they did research papers, they did this. You can survive in this field without doing what everyone else is doing. There are non-standard ways. And the referral network is a huge space to do so, because everyone just does the routine. There are very few that think outside the box and say, how am I going to build those the way that everyone else is not?
Yeah.
Any referral I worked with that I was very happy with their care, I would actually go onto Yelp and write them a very nice review as a physician. I'd say, I'm a referring physician. I've sent patients to this doctor. They did a wonderful job taking care of my patient. I can't recommend them more. That was, that no one was doing that, but they would see that and immediately like, this is someone who supports my practice.
Yes. Yes, man, you hit on a bunch of really good stuff. Let's see, in no particular order. There's a business side of your practice, and you have to treat it that way. Systematic, who are my targets, and I'm going to systematically approach them, and repetition.
Yes.
I do a lot of networking, and lots of people I know do it. And the principle of repetition, because you're right, people refer to those that they know, and there's some degree of likability, and there's enough, trust built that they'll give it a shot. And if you deliver on it, then more should come. But it takes time to do that. I mean, how many people do you become best buds with after one meeting? Zero. If you do, you should look at yourself and say, how do I allow that happen after only one? Unless it was, but those are so rare. And so the other thing about networking is, and it took me a little while when I started out on my own, it's once I told myself, I'm not here to sell anything or me, or necessarily, I'm not here to push a service or anything. I want to get to know people. And when at least for me, when I shed that sort of feeling of responsibility, because when you feel you've got to do that, you become pushy, you become unnatural, all of which shows and makes you a turnoff. But if you just get to know people, and there's social settings usually, by the way, at least in part, who's thinking about buying anything in a social setting? Very little. So stop trying to inject that into the conversation and just get to know people. I'm curious, in the 2 years or so you were doing this, were you having more than one dinner with the same person? Were you sort of deepening relationships, or was it all, or did you did 500 of the 500, I'm making up numbers here. Yeah. These 100 just, it felt like there was a connection, there's a natural fit. I'm going to go, knock on their door next Tuesday and shake their hand. Oh yeah, we had dinner. It was a great dinner. Just to try to, did you was there like a funnel effect for you with?
It does. It's what you said. It's a funnel effect. What we ended up doing too is I set up, for instance, a poker night. And I'd invite a group of physicians, and it was once every couple of weeks. We made it fun that we would get a dealer, for $100, and we'd split it. We'd have a dealer, so we'd keep the game going, and everyone had to bring a new bottle of bourbon every game. So, and we would taste test it. And it became this thing, and it was all physicians who wanted to get to know one another as well. So for everyone coming, it was a benefit to kind of be there. Not high stakes. We're talking about $20 buy-ins. It was really just for fun and to get people going. Little things like that matter. And to what you said, Carl, I think is really important is networking is friendships. Don't think about that you are selling yourself ever at the moment you're meeting someone. It's just, hey, I'm Alan. I'm in the area. This is what I'm doing. You talk about what you're struggling with or what you're working on. Nothing about this is what I do. Can you send me patients? It's just, hey, I'm a person and I am likable, and you should have a good sense of me once we leave this moment.
And the patients or the business or whoever will come. And by the way, there's be ready to give as well. If you walk in with the I need to get or it's not working, save your time. I can already tell you what's going to happen. It's, maybe somebody knows a better plumber than the $1,500 plumber. And you never know. And that's the network effect. If you build it it's so much about mindset and systems, and be patient. It feels like it's taking forever, but that's the time. It just takes time for busy people to carve out time to get to know, like, and trust other people. It just takes some time.
It takes time. It does. And to start, as long as you're smart about your finances in the office, to become profitable, and I'm not saying the quality or the amount of profit, in medicine, you'll get there quickly. But you'll be making a resident salary in the beginning. And that's okay. That's what it's going to be in the beginning. And within typical practices, you're looking at 2-3 years to kind of hit maturity. And in Beverly Hills, it's actually 5-6 years because of the competition here. So it's a longer build in this unique city. I hit high volumes within less than a year. And actually to the point that the group I was with at first, they sat me down and really got frustrated because I was doing better than they were. And they were 20 years of practice in terms of new patients in the office.
Thanks for all the revenue.
No,
Great.
it was, and
I wonder why you left.
Yeah, it's exactly partly why I left. There was other issues too, but it was one of the reasons I left. And so, and I never really shared how successful, because when I went into the startup, I reduced my number of hours in my office. So I became less in my medical office. But before I did, I mean, the volume I was seeing was leaps and bounds above what I was seeing in my partners. And I never shared it because they're so competitive, these other docs. And they forget, for instance, colorectal, they're always like, well, any patient you see in colorectal is one patient I didn't see. It's not true, especially if you're in a subspecialty. There's a real truth. For instance, there's a lot that in colorectal we do that as a general surgeon you can do. And so patients have a choice to go to a general surgeon or a colorectal surgeon. I'm board certified in both. But the more colorectal surgeons we're out there and the more we're working together, the more awareness patients have that specialty even exists. And if not, they're just going to see general surgeons, and they can. And so I've always been that is symbiotic for surgeons to work in promoting each other together, because there's not a zero sum in the patients that are available. It's a zero sum in that we have to increase awareness. And you do that, it actually behooves everyone to do better financially in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. So the growth mindset versus I don't know what the opposite is, but you have the growth, and it sounds like they did not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, a little off it, but to kind of push there, is one of the surgeons early on had given me a tidbit of wisdom that I think was so important. Surgeons, when you come out, have an option to take call. Now, one of the reasons I did colorectal is I don't like general surgery call. I think it's a miserable life. I'm very structured with my life. I don't like just any night of the week being thrown into coming in and not knowing what's happening. And what this surgeon had told me, I said, look, taking call is easy money. You will make money very quickly, but realize that the minute you're making that easy money, you're not waking up the next day and saying, I'm not making money. How should I make that money? So if you're smart and you're willing to push yourself, don't take call, because for those next couple months, you're not making that money. You're going to wake up every day and say, I need to make money. And you'll figure out how to make money sans call, without call. But if you have that call, you'll never wake up in the morning and say, well, what do I need to do to make money? Because there's a source of income there. And that call will be locked into your life forevermore. And I always tell every surgeon coming out this piece of advice. I think it's very important. It's not only for surgeons, but if you set yourself up not to get the easy way of making the money, but is not fruitful for a lifestyle, you will figure out a way to make your practice work without it. It may take a little bit longer, but then it's a permanent way that is much better for your lifestyle.
It's the discipline of saying no.
Yes.
Right. And we talk, I've marketing agency, a lot of friends at different independent agencies, and we talk a lot about who you really want, who's going to make, what type of client base is going to make up the type of practice or business you want to run. And from time to time, you'll get a call about, oh, there's this opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And we're zeroed in on healthcare. So I find myself saying no. When I started out, I remember this, I went to a local chamber of commerce. So we just do healthcare, so private practices, which means we say no to lots of people. And I was sitting in a room, there's 100 people there, 100 small business owners. And I sat there to myself shivering going, Carl, are you really telling yourself you're going to say no to all but these two people? And I said, yeah, the answer is yes. And I'm glad I did it. But it's unnerving. It is really unnerving in that moment to say no to something that's right there. And that call is more right there than it ever was for me. Stay focused, define the goal. And that's not a number. There's more to your goal than what kind of practice do you want to have? The number is the easy part. It's not a number. There's 10 different ways to get to a number. You just described one that's a sort of it's a bad drug, and it's going to
Yeah.
divert you from what you really want. And there's two ways to find that out. You can define it ahead of time, or you can go live it for a while, which is to some extent, you have to do it anyway. And then, you're down a bad path. You go, oof, I don't want to be here any longer. Fine. You can adjust. And there's people who do that too, but there's a bunch that don't. They just, their practice gets defined by the circumstances around them or whatever is the easiest path. And then they get trapped and they don't know how to get out of it. So yeah, I hear the business side of you very clearly, repetition, systems, goals, operations. It's very, yeah, you need to be cloned because there's a lot of, I guess the reason that I have a practice is because most doctors don't know the business side. They admit it. A fraction of them will say, help me out, please. What do you think I need? And then trust and do it for a while. So it's really cool. And Alan, there's so much that we could go down, but in the interest of kind of, bringing it home and wrapping it up, first question is, we talked about a lot of stuff, but between, how insurance pays and how to build a referral base, is there anything you think that I should have asked you, but didn't, or is there any point that's come into your mind that you want to make, but you haven't made yet?
Well, you just said something that I think is important it's so important for people to hear, because in medical school, in our training, they shame you to ever think about dollars and cents.
Really?
They do. There's in the medicine's about care. It's not about profit. It's not, and all of that it's an idealistic way of speaking. It sounds great,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, you are working, and your work does have value, and you're making a choice on how you're going to financially take care of yourself. People who are not in medicine, who have a business, they have a business to pass on to their children if they so choose. They may not want to. The only thing I have to pass on to my children is a good education. I can't really pass on my practice. There's ways, but not really. And I mean, that means my daughter has to become a colorectal surgeon.
Yeah.
And the only way, at least in a city like Los Angeles, where our educational system is terrible, is private education, independent schools, and they're very expensive. So am I wrong to want to just pass on even just a good education to my children? I don't think so. I'm not looking to drive. I have no interest in a Ferrari. I have no interest in a Lamborghini. I have no interest in first class flights.
Mhm.
But to give yourself an expectation that you should have some standard of living that is, corollary to what you are contributing to society, which is there, it's paramount, it's real.
Yeah.
And don't be shamed about that. I think that's important. And a key thing to kind of setting yourself to, that is okay for me to think about, how am I going to succeed financially?
Yeah.
Do not ever feel guilt for that, because so much of medical training makes people feel that they should feel guilty if they think that. And I think making money is part of life. It's why we work. It's why I'm not in the Congo just working there all year.
Right.
There's choices we make, and that's okay. There's so many pieces I would say to people. Anything, I don't know, from what I've said, anything else to add to kind of your question on that?
No, I don't think so. It's just meant to be, sometimes people have points and they go, oh, but just the question didn't stimulate the opportunity to make the point. And so that's why it's there.
Yeah, no, on insurance, know that we are struggling. The payments are getting less. Private practice in the last 5 years is finally less. There's less private practice physicians than hospital. There's pros and cons of the two. I would never do hospital if I could avoid it. I get less vacations in private practice than if I was employed, because an employed, you have guaranteed protected vacation time. And that's okay with me. But I have choice to how I want to practice. I have choice to what I want to take care of. There are patients that come in the office and I say, I'm not your guy. Not because I'm not capable, but I don't have the team. And quite honestly, I don't want to have 7 nights of sleepless nights, because that surgery is so complex that I know there's going to be multiple things and I have no support system to take it.
Yeah.
And so I will send them to one of the centers that have teams in place, but I have that choice available to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really get to build my practice for what I want it to be and see patients for what I want. And I'm doing fine. I mean, it's work. And one other tidbit is, I would also add, is choose where you spend your time. So we have an outside billing company. Probably I could save more money if I did that in-house and just hired someone and we manage that in-house, but that is time that is my time, not with my kids, not
Mhm.
working out, not doing something else that I enjoy, is the savings that I would reap worth that time? Because your time is worth something. And to me and my partner, it hasn't been. And so we're far more apt to say we were going to have an outside company do the billing. We know we're losing a little bit of money, but we're gaining so much more on the other side.
Yeah.
And there's moments you have to take a choice of, is this time effort? So I know some of my colleagues will on the weekends sit there and audit every single charge that goes through their system to see if they can find little bits of money that they've lost. I don't. And I am losing money for doing that, but I don't think the gain on the money I would have gained is what I would lose in my time that I could spend doing other things that I enjoy that
Yeah.
add to my life.
Yeah. The time thing, it's huge. I'm like you. I never valued a vacation. I valued a vacation a lot more when I was employee than I do now. I don't feel like I need, I've yet to say to myself since I started this 5 years ago, I need a vacation.
Yeah.
What I say is I need more time.
Yes.
And so at the same time, I've never valued my time more. I mean, I don't know that I did a very good job of valuing my time when I was employee. I don't think I did. I really did a very, compared to how I think about it now. Now it matters. Like, yeah, I could go hunt around for, I don't know, a better credit card provider and save a half a point or I don't know. It's
Yes.
not worth
Agreed.
the time,
Yeah.
and there's
Agreed.
examples around that all around the practice. So perfect. Thank you. And then, the last question is, so stepping back from all this, somebody's listening to this who's their private practice and looking for ways to new ideas to help them stay private over the long haul. What are one or two tangible steps you would advise them based on what we talked about? They could start right after they're done listening. And I'll start with one. Make this networking list. Like, just make a list, pick a 5, start easy, pick a 5 mile radius around your office and make a list of any provider who could be a good referral source, vice versa, and resolve, in the next 30 days, I'm going to walk over there or I'm going to drive over there and just say hello,
Yeah.
start the process.
So that's one. Another is in every specialty, there is a way to treat some ailment that doesn't even have to be new and cutting edge that no one really knows, but there's ways that, for instance, in Europe, they are doing things that we are not. And they could be small things. So for instance, in my field, we have something called pilonidal cysts. And in Europe, they're doing some stuff that no one in the US is doing. Very simple office treatments will work. And so find those and then market them. And so I will get a lot of inquiries from out of state, and people fly in to see me by simply adding just a few things to my treatment strategies that are from Europe that are not offered in the US. And patients use the internet now. They know probably better than we do as physicians what they're doing in Europe, because they're looking actively to what other treatment options are there. We come out of training and say, these are our treatment options. I follow this algorithm and stop. And so finding those little things and then putting it onto your site. You should have a website. It's no different than having a storefront. You should absolutely have a website, and it should have SEO and all the pieces that go. And those pieces should be what you are ranking yourself on to Google, because they're differentiators. Differentiators are everything. And so find one of those, differentiate yourself on that, and believe it or not, patients will find you very quickly, because they will say, well, someone's doing this. Who else in the US is doing this? And so I have 3 or 4 of those that I'm listed as one of the only people in the country that do that. Doesn't even mean you have to do it. I'll have people call me and say, I want to do this, and say, I don't think it's actually the right treatment for you, but they are now a patient of mine and we have the discussion. Doesn't mean you're forced to even use that, but you have it available for patients to do.
Yeah. Man, differentiation. I could talk a lot about that. We hunt for differentiation with every client that we have. Because you're right, patients go online either as step one or nearly step one to look for what their options are. And once they find you, they need to like what you see, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I have a business to help private practices do that. So excellent point. And again, Alan, thank you for coming on Practice Care. Again, I don't know what I took away from your day so that you decided to come on here, but I'm really appreciative that you did. We will put all of your contact info that you supplied in our show notes so that anybody who wants to contact you will be able to find you easily. And just a couple of points before we wrap up. So you're listening to this and you think, well, I've got some business wisdom to share on the business side of private practice. If that's the case, we want you to come on Practice Care. On the website, there's a link. There's just a little form to fill out. Tell us what you want to talk about. We'll get you scheduled as soon as possible. That's if you own a practice or you work in a practice. If you're someone like me that services private practice, you've got some expertise to share. Same process. Come on. We want to help private practice owners stay private. We need your help to do that. And finally, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Practice Care on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks very much. And until next time.